Hello, my children. Welcome to the Church of Pentan Podcast, the premier Battle Spirit Saga talk show available on all your favorite podcast platforms. May the cores be our saviors. I'm Espira, your head of service, and joined with me are my apostles, John and Cosmic. Cosmic, how are you doing this week?
Woo! Rough week. First new work schedule, trying to get back into content. My computer's done being crashed and all that stuff. So trying to get things started one step at a time again.
Yeah, I do know that with like you had like the crash and you lost a bunch of files. So like, are you back into like being able to at least decently produce videos now, or it's...
Yeah, I was able to recover a lot, thankfully, but there was some stuff I had to go back and like rip stuff from old videos or just try to find some like all the card images again, just to get new folders set up. So it was a little bit of a work in progress, but you know, a week is all it took, all things considered. Now it's back up and should be fine going forward.
Should be. There's always those little few things that's always like, oh yeah, I forgot that that's also a thing that I had, and you'll kind of pick up as you go along. But glad to hear that you're back on your feet. And John, how are we doing this week?
I am doing great. I've actually been having a lot of fun testing set 3. Kind of been neglecting Pro Tour testing for a bit, but set 3's been great. So I'm in good spirits and excited to talk about some new cards.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing for me, where it's like it's so tough between doing the right thing, which is testing the Pro Tour, and then doing the fun thing, which is actually testing set 3, which I'm enjoying way more, and deck building for that way more.
Yeah. You know, now that Alex is back from his world tour, he just wants to play all the time. So when I say I've been like neglecting Pro Tour testing, I'm still doing it. It's just we've been playing like 8 hours a day, and like maybe half or 6 hours of that is just playing set 3 stuff. So, you know, it's been, you know, he's kind of a madman when it comes to testing. So
yep, the man puts in his hours, which, you know, given his results, don't necessarily blame him. And Team TD is definitely probably the team that has dedicated the most hours to testing. So kind of goes hand in hand with the performances you guys have had as well. So today's show, we'll be talking about the Chilean Grand Open, which is the last Grand Open of Wave 2. And then we'll be jumping into kind of a little bit more of a detailed discussion about the Pro Tour and kind of our predictions of what's going to be moving on to that now that we move away from this Axe Spider Depths format. Of course, that'll tie in with Sorlet, the lore set, which is released like last week for some regions, releasing this week for other regions. So kind of like the official release on that front.
Yeah, I'm pumped for that. You know, like I know when we kind of reviewed it, I think during our first episode, which would have been, I guess, a month ago now, I think we were all kind of down on most of it, right? We figured that Tokiwa was probably the big winner, which it still is. That hasn't changed. But with set 3 now, we've been testing a lot of the lore set cards in some decks, and some of them are a lot better than we gave credit for, especially the Red Nexus, Victory Oath. That's actually been pretty saucy with the new Mermaid. So, you know, I know that your opponent also gets to draw 2, but if you're playing somewhat of a stall mill deck with like Mandala, then, you know, basically a free Star Blessed is always going to be pretty good. So
yeah, it plays into the mill theme. It also kind of like in those matchups, usually when you're going up against a control deck, it can often be not so much about like giving them the number of cards as just have them seeing the right card to deal with like your control. And if you're just comboing, like if you're just blowing up their board with a card that we're going to talk about later, every turn, it almost kind of doesn't matter what they see. So
yeah, and that's the thing when you're playing a super non-interactive deck. Like I don't care how many cards you have or what they do. Like they're probably not going to work the way that you want them to. So you know, it's kind of how it works out.
Yeah, it's really interesting as we're going through the spoilers and seeing like the Crush archetype come online, being this like very linear player necessarily curve out with all these Crush guys, just jam them across the board. And like we hope to get some mill strategy. And now it turns out like, you know what, we tested all that, just scrap it. We have Mandala, it does enough, build up your nexuses. The other XR that we're going to talk about is absolutely insane. It's like such a divergence from probably what the devs intended, because you can very clearly see it as a strategy in the main set to, okay, well, what if we just play good cards? And it does feel a lot like set 2 with green, where it's like, it was largely a splash color. So I'm assuming by set 4, more of blue will come online. But man, Crush was fun, but I think the other side of it's just going to be far better, just with how it's shaping up early on.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like after testing Crush, it the Crush cards largely feel irrelevant because they're not that big in stats. First of all, they're all kind of expensive with just a handful of reduction, and the mill that they generate doesn't matter in the end when you have like a mill 12 on summon. So I feel like what Cos was just saying is you kind of just want to go to like a good card blue deck, splash 2-3 other colors. We've even built 6 color decks and they've been actually really good. And just kind of abuse cards like Mermaid and stall as long as you can, and then just play Mandala with like an Impaler Forest or something, and 2 turns the game's over.
Yeah, we went from having a well-designed blue, like it all fits together nice and neat, and then we had 3 absolutely insane blue XRs where it's just like, all right, what's the best way to abuse these anymore, right? So it's like my heart is so torn because I appreciate what they did. Again, the person who's like the blue main out there, like I do appreciate what they did with the set, but all this other stuff is just better. And I know we're gonna talk about later, but I want golems to be a thing. I don't think it's going to be because just tokens and Floodstream meta and et cetera, et cetera. But damn, what a cool card. But I won't get on that before we get to the spoilers later.
Yeah, exactly. So we will actually jump into the reveals as the last segment, and before that, we'll be jumping into Guess That Flavor Text. So to kick us off, the Chilean Grand Open just wrapped up, and North America won. So, which is kind of how like I'll preface this. On the face of it, I actually was the one who landed up to taking down the Chilean Grand Open. So it's my face there. But if you guys will notice in the Hall of Fame section in the community Discord, it faded in the background. There is the rest of Team NA there. So ended up traveling down to North America with Alex Blandon, Anthony, Andy, Daniel, and Rex, and honestly kind of like shut down most of the tournament. And for what's worth, so like Alex, myself, and Daniel had arrived a day or 2 days prior, which kind of gave us a downtime. When it came to like the California Goon Squad, Rex, Anthony, and Andy, they showed up the morning of at like 5 a.m., came to the tournament, and then peaced out at like midnight.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like, hey guys, let's make a 1-day trip down to a different country, and just screw it. Let's just try to spike a Grand Open.
Yeah.
And everyone made top 16. I think the only person who didn't make top 8 was Andy, and so it's it's crazy. It's well done, and anyone who tries to discount it, it's really not that much easier than a regular Grand Open in the States, right? Because your last few rounds, you're still playing very good players. So, it's still a pretty good accomplishment, and, well done.
Yeah, no, it was a ton of fun. And I agree with that. Like, don't get me wrong. I do think the skill ceiling is definitely higher in other regions at the moment. And that's just because like the availability of tournaments and play in Latin America are very much more restricted than other regions. So like, I'm not trying to discount anything on to that side, but at the end of the tournament, right? Like I'm playing Blandon, Daniel is playing against, like we're all kind of playing each other or against players who have up until that point gone undefeated. So there does lay some credence to that. But even from round 2 onwards was an all-American top table effectively. Literally round 2 was like every single one of us were at a different chair at the top table, which was really funny. And that kind of was the thematic for the entire tournament.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's really cool. And, it was a smaller event with probably a lower skill ceiling overall. But like I was saying earlier, like say in a 6-round tournament, round 5 and 6, you're playing top level players. Whereas maybe somewhere like, Monroeville 7-round tournament, you might start playing top level players like round 4. That's like the only difference. I mean, other than that, like you still have to win your matches. Right. So, that was really impressive to see the top 8. What 5 NA players? Like, if I was a Chilean player, I'd be pretty pissed. I think.
Yeah, we were informed that some half of the field hate us.
Yeah. Like, why are you guys here taking our Bandai money? But,
and when you think about it too, right, this is the end of the Grand Opens we have for this wave, and this is a bunch of North American people who have been doing well at multiple events for this, set, and it's just like, oh shit, here we go. Now they're all showing up, and they're, constant top 16, top 8 performers that are just here to take some more money again. So it's what we'd expect to see, all things considered, just the top players continue to do well. This is a very skill intensive game at the end of the day. So, and we, of course, being in North America and being, within our own communities, we have a bias to know these players because we're seeing them at events, we're traveling with them to a lot of times. So we know how good they are, where we might not always have the visibility into other regions. But again, we will see this time and time again, I'm sure, in Wave 3. Or I guess I don't remember how the regionals timeline lines up, but if anyone travels, I'm sure we're going to see Alex go on another adventure, and surprise, he's probably going to top 8 again. That's just, he's been putting in the work and it's been doing his world tour time and time again.
Wave 3 is going to be a little bit tougher because we're such a tight schedule that actually pans out. Chile is at the same time as the Netherlands, I think, the Netherlands Grand Open.
Oh, that's what it was.
And then I think
there was some overlap.
Yeah, and then Australia, I think, overlaps with Pasadena or something like that. So it'll be hard to. This is definitely one of the harder travel waves for sure, just because of how many overlaps there are. And I think the only
5 Grand Opens in 3 weeks, right? There's Pro Tour, and then 2 Grand Opens, 2 Grand Opens, 1 Grand Open. So there's, from Pro Tour on, it's nonstop events for an entire month, and they're all overlap.
So it's going to be quite the push here, and I think from what we were discussing, Daniel is the only one considering going to Chile instead of the Netherlands. Switch fair, and I'll be interested to kind of see. But even in the Latin American side, you still see consistently a lot of the same players over at top tables. So Blast, who actually ended up top 8 in the Pro Tour, also ended up top 8 in this tournament. Alejandro is another player who not only topped the Latin American tournament last time, but also actually ended up participating in the Pro Tour as well. So, and I think when we were talking to them, some 5 or 6 players from Latin America, which I thought was more than we were ever going to see, actually ended up attending the first Pro Tour. So hopefully get to see their faces again for the third Pro Tour, potentially Worlds. And given that there's not going to be Latin Americans there, realistically, more invites to go around, more prize money to go around for players to be able to actually travel in those events.
Yeah. So, did any of them say anything about going to Amsterdam or?
No, to my understanding, none of them are going to the Netherlands. That's just way too much of an expenditure to justify it. So, so because realistically, that's probably a trip only first and second place could justify for, and we were going anyways.
Yeah. Right.
So, but the tournament was great. Tournament organizers were awesome. The meta was decently diverse, and I think that's just kind of it's funny how people force themselves into creativity when accessibility isn't as easy. So we saw a lot of yellow. I mean, round 4, or it was either round 4 or round 5. My opponent, who was X1, was on Yellow Fabled Beast. So that was the thing that you saw. But very much the top tables was dominated by, it was either Terror or Axe Spider for the most part. I think if you look at Top Cut, 5 of us were on Axe Spider. One of us was on Terra. One of us was on, and then 2 aggro players, 1 green aggro and 1 white aggro, which was Rex. So, kind of what we expected. And for what it's worth, I think it's a good push for the banlist format. If anything, I think it'll at least shake up the Pro Tour, which is exciting. But the tournament went well. It was kind of like a mini Bandai Fest, and it's very interesting to see that TOs are more open to doing that. Pasadena is going to be another one of these Bandai Fests, but it was One Piece, Dragon Ball, and Battle Spirits. But they did a great job of staggering the start times for every round for every game, so you're not constantly fighting with 2 different tournaments plus your own to try and get to sit down, which was kind of nice. But no, overall it was a great time. Enjoyed it. It was 1 day, which I think they always push for 1 day in these Latin American tournaments. But hey, when you're talking about the numbers that we had, where it's 6 Swiss rounds plus a top 8, I'm not too worried about that. So great experience, great time. Honestly, highly recommend people to, if you can find a good flight and you have the time on the weekends to be able to fly to some of these international events. They do lend themselves to some really fun camaraderie, especially if you go with a group of guys. So
yeah, I was going to try to go to the Chile event actually, but I got my passport last week, so the week before the event. So the first thing I did was check tickets, and it was $1,500. I'm like, yeah,
it's
not
a bit.
Yeah. Even with some sort of price split, like it would still be not worth it in the long run.
Right. So that was the Chilean Grand Open, the final Grand Open and the final tournament for this format. So to that end, yes, honestly, big claps. I'm so tired of playing even just the Pro Tour format. I'm like, wow, I have space in my deck and I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with it. So, we get in the lore set, like you said, in terms of some of the set 3 stuff, some of the stuff is really funny there. I think in terms of the Pro Tour, we're very much looking at like Tokiwa and Godslaying to kind of be relevant cards moving into that format, which of course the lore set is releasing this week for North America. So get your hands on that. But in terms of Pro Tour format, it is the post ban list format. We did talk about a little bit about the impacts of those last week when we talked about the ban list. But then I guess kind of like, what are the predictions moving into the Pro Tour? Every team, naturally, all of us are participating in the Pro Tour, and we kind of have our own builds and things that we're going to test. So I think there's a level of understanding that a lot of these things are happening behind closed doors. But overall, meta prediction, purple hasn't been touched. There's an argument to be said that if purple was a top tier competitive strategy in both set 1 and set 2, and it is the color to go unscathed from these ban lists going into a post ban list format, that it is probably lining up to be one of the best strategies going into the Pro Tour.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think purple will be the most played if nothing else. Purple is a lot of the top players' pet deck, for lack of a better word. So the fact that they get to play it now kind of unabated is probably what they're going to gravitate to. It didn't have any cards banned or anything, obviously, but Starblast Draw is still in the game, so I wouldn't say that it went unscathed, but I think it'll definitely be the most played deck, probably by quite a lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see 30% of the Pro Tour field be some form of purple deck.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I gotta say, before we get one angry comment, technically, actually, the depths did get banned. So technically, yes, purple did lose a card.
Yeah, in my head, depths is an everything card.
Because they drop a million cards otherwise. Like, you have other just fine nexus. So yeah, I gotta
purple's
go.
Depths is like
my bad. Yeah, so in my head, it's a rainbow card. I totally forgot that's a purple card.
We've already moved on in our testing. Like, let's just play these other purple nexus because they're just fine, it turns out, right? And you have so many other 10,000 cards that all draw anyways. So again, I think it lends itself to more of the decks having flexibility with them, and purple just being like, purple's like relieved that they get to take out depths, right? Because one, you have other nexus that can fill that role a lot of times, and two, you just get more deck space to counter or target, I should say, those other maybe not so great matchups. So I know purple's going to be a big winner. And for me, again, at least high level, I love Tokiwa. I think the card has just been fantastic. I have no idea where it's going yet. Obviously, I did well with the green deck in Monroeville. I'm starting there at some point, but I just love what Tokiwa is able to do. It does have that like play from behind theme that they're still going to be pushing for green, it feels like. So, even in a set 3, right? Because we talked about, many of us are also like just testing set 3 for fun because it's so much more enjoyable, like what the format is looking to be for set 3, that I really like where it lands in set 3 as well. So any excuse I can get to keep playing Tokiwa, I'm probably just going to keep playing Tokiwa decks between the Pro Tour and set 3. But the other one, of course, is I'm sure someone's going to, figure out something for red, and not looking at you or anything, John, and the rest of True Duelists. But I think there is probably some room for red to find a home somewhere within the meta itself.
Yeah, well, my statement of purple being the most played deck, like if that's true, then if we, for example, show up with red as a team, then probably do well. So, if we're off on the meta call, then maybe we won't do well. I don't know, but I think there'll be quite a few purple decks. And I think one of the main reasons is Rotting Swamp, right? I think Rotting Swamp's probably the best nexus in the game now, other than Scorched Battlefield. So, those, when you have Rotting Swamp, you can make pretty much any purple deck work. I think, mid-range purple / aggro purple is pretty good. And of course, court control, I mean, I don't think there's anything really holding that back other than Starblast Draw. So, speaking of Rotting Swamp, I don't know if you can see the sign this week, but it says "Stop playing Rotting Swamp in your green decks." Every green deck I see just has 4 Rotting Swamps, and as someone who has tested Rotting Swamp in green extensively, because I want it to be good, it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the idea. I think the idea is sound, right? Like you're just constantly crashing your guys, and like, oh hey, I'll just replace them and get a draw. So it's like you almost feel like it wants to fill the mini depths role that it does for purple, but in the same way as green. But it doesn't, unfortunately, totally play out that way.
Yeah, a lot of the reason is, just to expand more on that, is that you usually don't crash your guys into their things because all of your guys are huge. Like they're all 4Ks. So a lot of times they don't trade or die like at all. And then if they are too small, usually just Pincer or Thorn Prison or Tokiwa, and they don't block anyway. So it's just and it's also a really big tempo loss to play it on any turn that's not one. And even if you play on one, a lot of times it's a setback because you don't have any reduction in play after that. So it just doesn't really fit into that style deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have to lean on like strategies that more proactively want their stuff to die on your board, which is why like
like purple curse.
Yeah, purple curse, which is just like I just want to trade up the entire game. Or yellow purple aristocrats. I don't know, like like Nemesis, right? Like that's it. Like people have been leaning on purple Nemesis for a while now. And I think people are trying to do like spiral tower stuff with it now, which is kind of like an interesting way to get like infinite value, especially since you with red losing a bit of speed, you maybe have a little bit more time to set up Lamorak loops and stuff like that. So that is probably the kind of space in which we can see Rotting Swamp succeed the most. Past that, there's the aggro decks, right? White aggro is still going to be white aggro. Green aggro is still going to be green aggro. And those decks are kind of line up to still kind of do what they're going to do. Rex did this man, like the fastest games I've ever seen, like fastest top 8 match I had ever seen, where he just like 5 minutes and it was over. So those aggro decks definitely can still get there. I think for what it's worth, if you're prepared for them, it's not as bad because like Dragon Halberg and stuff like that can definitely be great tools against those strategies. But those decks are still there. So I think while there is if anything, the meta is opening up, I don't think we're seeing large swath changes like the same way set 3 is going to be. But it's the kind of room where it's worth at least testing once again what's going to be there, because there's room for innovation to at least kind of change up how certain matchups get played out, and at least have space for other strategies to at least kind of bake in their niche a little bit more, right? Like how does green mid range, especially with Tokiwa, like you can just be a Canyon deck that happens to play Tokiwa. You can also just be the green deck that happens to just play Tokiwa naturally. So kind of what shell fits in best with that. I think there's more room for like Beldegor Loops deck, but of course those get punished with Starblast Draw, which means red probably has a niche. Do you go big, right? Like does Nova have room again? Probably, because Axe Spider's gone, which means you lose the thing that, you literally stops your entire strategy off Helm. So I think there's a lot in terms of like where the Pro Tour can go. And I think I'm not all that far off base when I'm saying, you could look at an odd 7 different strategies off rip that could be contenders for at least a good spot in the Pro Tour. And then, even beyond that, if we want to include yellow, maybe there's like 9, who knows? But
yeah. Like the way I kind of tier the decks right now, and I know people have their own lists of what they think's viable, but to me personally, like I feel like there's 3 cards that kind of define the game right now in a post-ban world. There's Scorched Battlefield, Rotting Swamp, and Namen City. And they're all 4-cost nexuses. So I think any deck you play probably has to be built around or include one of those 3 cards, unless you're like some sort of like green aggro or white aggro deck. Canyon is like another nexus that, could be probably included in those 4-cost nexuses. But like those are the pillars for any deck. So those are like the tier 1 decks, and then everything else are the decks that aren't playing those cards. And I think that the Pro Tour, every deck in the top 8, top 16 will probably have 4 of at least one of those nexuses. So they're all pretty format defining.
So I think the big thing that we talked about a lot with depths was the fact that every deck had to have 4 Burning Force, and even to that level, maybe a couple of Vultures if you're in red, Nexus Hazards, what have you, to be able to deal with the card because of how centralizing it is to the game. And I've been saying this because I know a lot of people have been like throwing like 0 Burning Force into their decks, and if you're a more tempo oriented deck, I could totally see that because you kind of don't care about dealing your board, you're just trying to present lethal to your opponent. But I refuse to not have at least like 2 Burning Forces in my deck because I'm like, I don't want my purple opponent to go wild with swamps, right?
Yeah, I don't think, and this might be a hot take, I don't know, but I think Ferraro Slash is wildly underplayed right now. Like, it's 1 mana cheaper than Burning Force, and like, I mean, I know it kills 1 fewer guy, but the fact that you can burst it as a complete blowout to kill like a Rotting Swamp, a Scorched, something else, and a Spirit is huge. That's like game defining right there. And I think we've all been kind of not brainwashed per se, but just kind of stuck in our ways that, all right, Burning Force is the way and there's no other card. Like, Ferraro Slash is incredibly good right now. And my limited testing with it, it's just been incredible.
No, I definitely agree. And you kind of just mentioned the exact reason why, right? It's like we shifted from something that was depths plus other Nexus to, now all the good Nexus that are trying to build their decks around are 4 costs. Like, we got to give the honorable mention to Blessed Cathedral because it's just there somewhere. And it's still a very strong Nexus for when it's able to run away with the game. Yeah. And that is also getting hit by Ferrari Slash, or Ferro Slash is the proper name. So it's one of those cards that I think a lot of us now have to reevaluate and seeing that, as you mentioned, yes, it's going to be insanely strong when you get to high roll that burst, because chances are when it's early enough, and of course, if you have the reductions for red, you're going to be able to hit their key Nexus piece and kill something. So getting that 2 for a 1-year opponent anytime is always a welcomed trade in your favor. And Ferro Slash definitely fills that role very nicely as the meta has evolved where it is post bans.
And I mean, no one's going to play around it, right? Like you set a burst like turn 2 or whatever, and they're going to think it's Dream Bomb, or they're going to think it's Star Blast, or they're going to think it's like an early Ice Shield. And then you're like, oh, here's this Ferro Slash. And then, your opponent's like, oh, okay, now they're way behind. So,
because the burst is taking damage, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Loss of life.
Yep.
Yeah.
The easiest burst.
So I think 100% has more utility there. And I think that's my biggest thing is just the fact that it does not mean that depths isn't around, that we can disrespect Nexuses. They still present a huge amount of advantage. And purple is still one of those things where, like, how do you win the purple mirror? You be the purple deck who can hold up a Nexus, right? Like, you're the one who can keep drawing cards, who cannot run out of gas. And it's a huge tempo swing if, say, like, white can't play a Nomen Guard on turn 2 because you decided to get rid of the Nexus and then you win in, right? So I think those kinds of things hugely sway the matchup. And I 100% agree with John that, like, they're pivotal, and I think people should be respecting Nexuses regardless of the fact that we're not playing against depths, because we were respecting Nexuses before that, and it doesn't mean that, like, depths is gone that we shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's still no great answer to like a turn 1 Scorch because you still lose tempo either way. But Slash being 1 less core than Burning Force, you can actually play it early and still do other things, to kill a Rotting Swamp or a Namen City or a Blessed Cathedral. The only things it doesn't hit that might be relevant would be like Red Rock Fortress and some purple decks maybe. And then if the green decks, if they ever decide to play the Greatwood Castle Keep, I mean, and even not killing those, I don't think is a huge deal, but I think Slash is pretty good right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot, especially since those Nexuses are like 4-ofs in all of those quote unquote best strategies anyways. So I think there's definitely a world in which you have to consider them, at least at some number, especially just because being able to do it for free is such a like tempo swing on your side that you're able to just like kind of fully go in from that point on and still have some safety net. So because you're not committing all your cores to trying to destroy it for a turn. So 100% definitely do recommend Ferro Slash. Alex Blandon, I think if you'd like to return my 4th copy whenever you want, that would be great.
Yeah, my 2 core drains all red. Why would you give this guy cards?
And my 2 Flamefishes.
Oh yeah, I will say a thing that I really appreciate, and again, this is probably just like it's very early in pro tour testing, and set 3 will have some shakeup as well. But like, I've been finding that the burst zone just matters so much more now. Like it used to be just straight, okay, it's Ice Shield, Dream Bomb, or Star Blast Draw, and you could kind of know which one it was, right? But now it feels like there's much more variety into it, and how yes, if it's early enough, you can generally gauge it's not absolute Ice Shield, but then it's still going to be one of three real options depending on what you're playing against. Again, Dream Bomb, Star Blast Draw, or Feral Slash, and you have to respect that. And it's only going to be better as we go on, where it's going to come down to like, is it bluffing? Is it, what type of blowout do my opponent think that I'm going to play into, and how do I pivot around it? So when will we get burst interaction? Who knows? But I at least appreciate that the burst zone is more of a decision point, at least again, very early on in testing, and then we'll see how things shake up with set 3.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Dude, nothing sucks more than playing around a Star Blast Draw the entire game that was actually an Ice Shield. Like that is like when you're talking about mind games, dude, or like where Rowan at I think it was Tulsa, where he got rid of his burst Star Blast Draw to put down another Star Blast Draw, which then forced, I think it was Zach he was playing against, to finally go into it, allowing him to draw 4 cards. Like those kinds of mind games are always such a good time.
Yeah, and things like that, they only work against really good players, right? Because if you set a burst early, a good player is going to play around it, right? So that's when you can just get them with like, okay, I'm going to set this Ice Shield turn 2 because I don't have Star Blast Draw, and now they can't really play the game, right? But I think someone who's less experienced, I mean, I'm not going to say bad, but maybe they're less experienced, they probably wouldn't pick up on that, and they just ram their win summons anyway. But I think at a Pro Tour level, you can really get someone with the mind games. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think card games are at their peak when it's not just about the text on the cards, but it's about the way in which you sequence things, or in the way you put traps or baits that force the opponent to. It's the playing around of the game that becomes kind of like the meta game, right? Like everyone knows what the cards do. You're never gonna gotcha someone because they have like, say, like a theft in their hand. You didn't know what theft was, right? Like you made a concerted decision that this play is probably bad into theft because I'm actually playing against 3 or 4 other things instead, right? And then if they have it, they have it. But it's not like, oh my God. Whereas here it's like, okay, well, what's the burst now, right? And how badly do I get punished if it's actually this or that? Where it's always funny because it's those, like you said, those kinds of strategies won't work as much against people who aren't as seasoned in the game because they'll just go through it. And that's why you kind of have to like mold the way you play to kind of player level at some level. And I'm not saying like, hey, like disrespect your opponent's skill level, but it's just like the same tricks that work between us playing each other aren't going to work against someone who's just slamming cards and going in.
Yeah.
So you have to read your opponent. That's the same skill across all TCGs. Just again, be it bluffing, be it trying to understand where they're coming from. There's a lot of strategies involved. Just playing the game and then also being able to read your opponent to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So with that said, that is kind of like our kind of top level talk about the Pro Tour. As we get closer to the Pro Tour, of course, I'm sure we'll have a couple of more discussions there. But of course, we're to some degree all have some little level of spikeness to us. We are traveling far and wide to participate in the Pro Tour. So if anything, I do believe it's going to be streamed. So you guys definitely want to keep your eyes out for kind of the stream link there and kind of watch onwards and see where we all landed when it comes to figuring out the format. And hopefully some of us can take it home, right? We can all perform. That would be best. But moving onwards, we do have a Guess That Flavor Text. So, fun little game that we include in the podcast where I will be providing our apostles a piece of flavor text. They can try and guess what that card is alongside 2 lifelines, of which one is the family type and then secondary is the cost. So far, our boys have been pretty good. It hasn't taken them too much to kind of get there. So hopefully we'll be able to get another solid guess this time around. Gentlemen, are you guys ready?
I am ready for this.
Let's go.
I am so far up on cause right now.
Yeah, I just because I read the lore, but then don't remember what card it's attached to. I can tell you the lore of each set, but I am so bad at flavor text. I'm starting to realize.
All right, so we have the realm of flame is obstructed by volcanic fumes, leaving many areas largely unexplored. Undiscovered clans are thought to be numerous.
This feels like
actually.
This feels like a nexus. Are there any nexuses with flavor text? No, there's
not.
Which, for what it's worth, Bandai, there's so much room on nexuses. Just put flavor text on those. and then provide us SPR nexuses.
I had to think for a second, but no, there's no nexus with flavor text.
Lore magic is always on the
Lore
spirits.
magic, yeah. It's definitely a spirit.
This might be a blue card.
This card's got to be red, right?
I definitely can tell you it's red. It's like there's no, it's not like the Emperor Beast protecting their land. There's also no cues to it either, because usually, Star Dragons being the police, we have Emperor Beast protecting their land, stuff like that. There's just nothing here to go off of.
This has got to be like a Dragonoid. I don't know. All right, I'm ready for the first hint.
Yeah, I'm ready as well.
All right, so the family type is actually Emperor Beast.
It is an Emperor Beast. Okay. I don't know. The first thing that pops into my head is like the 2-drop like Fox Emperor Beast Fire Fox thing. I can't think of its name.
Yeah, like it's got 1 reduction.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm still blanked.
Awesome.
No, unfortunately, this is not my week to recover either. Apparently, again, spoiler: I'm not a red player. I don't know if anyone knew that or anything, but I don't spend a lot of time looking at red cards.
All right, then for your last hint, it is a 4-cost.
4-cost Emperor Beast.
There's so many janky ones at 4-cost.
It is it is a flooded cost number, that is for sure.
My guess is anything I have, because I was looking at it earlier and I don't even know what the flame text or the flavor text says. But the 4-cost Vajnocerosis or whatever his name is.
Yeah. The like chunky. Does he even?
That's He has lots of flavor text, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is
a longer one. I can tell you that much.
All right. So, Kaz, what's your guess?
The only one I know is because I did it in a video is Lampguard, right? From set 3, but I don't think you'd pick a set 3 one. So I have actually no idea.
So, gentlemen, the realm of flame is obstructed by volcanic fumes, leaving many layers unexplored. Undiscovered clans are thought to be numerous. Is the flavor text of Blazing Boar?
Blazing Boar.
Yeah.
Oh, what a cutie! Look,
I never would have gotten that.
So, a little bit weird that they talk about undiscovered clans when Emperor Beast is probably one of the more defined clans in terms of kind of what happens in Battlesphere. But I mean, for what it's worth, Cosmic, isn't this card in the demo decks? I feel like you've probably seen this card for like months and months.
As someone who did literally 100 demo games, I have burned that out of my brain. It's in the vault. I never want to see the red demo deck again for as long as I live. And there's still a stack of them in the back of my car from the road tour, for crying out loud. So if anyone in the States needs them, I got you. I got a 50 or so left in there, probably. Good Lord.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, a card that's not terrible, right? Like it's a tutor from your drop, which can kind of have its services. And I know a lot of Nova decks tend to like to use it to be able to fetch things they pitch off Canyon. So
yeah, Blazing Boar is cool. I mean, it's pretty cool to get back like a Rex, and then I'll already have 2 reduction for Rex. But it was played a little bit in the last Chile Open. Ian Bremont, right? He had two Blazing Boars in his Pterosaur deck. So it's not bad. I just don't think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Opening yourself up to Star Blessed Draw obviously is always going to feel bad, but I like it as just a random one of in a lot of like the more mid-range red lists, because sometimes obviously you're going to have Volcanic Canyon. You just have to discard something early because the rest of your hand is just garbage, and then at least maybe at some point that Blazing Boar is going to pop up so you can get it back from your trash. So there's definitely something there, at least with the Volcanic Canyon side of things, but I really wish I had a couple more reduction. Probably would be too good, because then obviously you're reducing the cost of looping stuff back, but at least 1 more pip. That's all we could have asked for.
Mm-hmm. It on that topic, it does definitely feel like there's a lot of cards that like would be able to get there if it was just for like that 1 more pip, right? Like Smag, which I understand there's balancing there between the fact that there's rainbow, but if you had like 1 pip, right? And I don't know if Battle Spirits does rainbow pips, but I imagine they do at some point. So
they just added them, fun fact.
Oh, there you go.
After 16 years, it was a limited set. So rainbow reductions are a thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think those are things that would go a long way. But talking about cards and pips and kind of where they would go, we'll be jumping into the last of the reveals for set 3. So thankfully we weren't slow drip the XRs. We actually did get all of them, which was very sick. They're slow dripping the SPRs, but that's okay. It's pretty art. We get to enjoy kind of those as we go through the last couple of weeks, and then hopefully maybe TP cards come soon. So where we dropped off last week were Magics. So looking over here now, they're actually all on BSSDB. So once again, thank you to Bloody Malice for putting them on there extremely early. So now if you guys want to deck build and mess around with set 3, you guys can do so on that website. In terms of things we see here, nothing insane, right? I think Plant Trap we had already seen previously, in due to the fact that it's a collab promo. So 5 cost 2 green reduction burst when your opponent resolves a when summon. Your opponent selects 2 of their refresh spirits and exhausts them. So kind of a Thorn Prison on that part. That has an additional activate main or flash. You get to select a spirit cost 5 or more. If it's green, refresh it. If it's not green, exhaust it. So kind of like beefy Thorn Prison, a little bit more limited in its usages, but can be more blowouty depending on the win summons. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I like the fact that it's almost like a regain for your green spirits if you don't need it for its Thorn Prison abilities, which I think are kind of neat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Plant Trap's good. You know, out of all these spells on the screen, I think Plant Trap and Strong Draw are probably the only ones that'll see, you know, any considerable play. Some of the blue ones might see some niche play here and there, but, you know, for the most part, I think that it's just, well, of course, Floodstream's there too, but we already know about that one.
I'm a little bit biased towards the break spell, which I forget the full name, but just the versatility of it. And it reminds me a lot of like, because you're going to be in a blue heavy deck, it reminds me a lot of Fatal Push to make the Magic comparison, because with the full board, it's going to cost you just 1. And you do have that flash flexibility to destroy a 3 cost or less. You know, don't care how big it is, right? And just having that flexibility for that, because at the same time, you're going to be wanting to play this in those stall out kind of mill decks that we mentioned. And then late game, it just turns into, oh, I just need 3 or 4 more mill. And then you suddenly get this, that you can just hold off, get the mill combo with Mandala because it's cheap enough. And then you go, sorry, opponent, I just hit you for like, 16 in a turn. Good game. So,
yeah, you know, that's a great point. I mean, I think Break Burst is pretty cool too. I don't think in the long run it'll be needed, but I think it is a pretty solid card. So I should see some play here and there.
Yeah, my biggest thing with blue is specifically things like that. Like, where is the room for the niche mill, right? Like, yes, we got Mandala that like can hit those 13s or however many number. I always forget. Like 12, is it? 16.
And then 4 more.
Pitching a crush card. Yeah,
crush
exactly.
Card. Yeah.
So it's so those are great. So like that, is obviously your main win con. It's like, how much do we need to supplement that? And crush strategy is going to be the spirits. And it's like, okay, well, do we just do blitz because, hey, I can get like rip an extra 5 or whatever, or use the Nexus that rips a couple on 1 summons, right? So it's just,
well, going back to the mill card and kill a 3K, it was called burst something.
Break burst.
Break burst. Yeah, there is something to be said for non-interactive mill, right? Because every other mill card is well, that's not Mandala, is crush, right? So crush makes you attack. So something like this, you can just sit back, not attack, not worry about it, just mill 3 cards guaranteed, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're chunking 12, 15, 16 at a time with Mandala, those extra 3 cards might mean winning the game on the spot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I think, is it Magic Wrench that rips 4 off the opponent's side? So like, there's a lot of these different options that you can kind of consider to kind of like wrap around the strategy. Now, in a control shell, does that matter? Maybe not, because maybe Mandala is all you really need. But I do agree with Break Burst. At least it has that flexibility of also being removal. So you could add in a control shell, and then it just like doubles as being able to proc something off. I mean, blue is like so incredibly anti-aggro, and like I've seen people on the Discord talk about how they're blue and struggling against aggro, and this must be like, again, the type of battle spirits that other people play that I'm not playing, because I don't understand how that comes together. When you've got tools like Chained Arena and Floodstream.
Yeah, like your deck's probably poorly built, which makes sense early on for blue decks. Your deck's probably just poorly built if you're struggling against like an aggro deck. But blue, of all the colors, does have the tools to quite easily handle any sort of like early aggression. Where you start getting into trouble is the mid game, when they start playing like 4, 5, 6 drops Because then it's a little bit harder to kill them. I know that we have that. I think he's a 6 cost with 2 reduction that kills their highest cost card. But from my experience with testing blue, like I never want to attack my opponent, like ever. It's like the ultimate, like I'm core starving you, I'm taxing you with these arenas. Like you're never getting a core from me, and then you just win by playing your Mandala.
Yeah, I definitely think, especially given like some of the XRs we've seen have lent themselves to that strategy a lot. And it's crazy how much the XRs changed our whole perceptions about the entirety of the set, which we're actually just about to see now, especially since they kind of like bring around the strats.
That's a great segue right into them, because 3 of them for blue are quite spectacular.
Yeah. So one quick final shout out for me for the Magics though. Muscle Charge, flavor wise, is probably my favorite Magic card. And
some of the coolest art, have to say. It's like here's this ultimate 8-pack. Respect me.
I just love that card.
And I very much appreciate the very selective censoring of what's being covered in each of them. So very, very interesting placement there. Love that.
Is that your elbow, or are you just happy to see me?
But yeah, so to that front, we can now jump over, hit that rarity, and hit the X's. So we got a little bit of everything. The way that it panned out is every color got 2, besides blue that got 4. Now at first, for what it's worth, art amazing. I think across the board, they're really sick cards to look at, and the SPRs even more so. I will say though, when we got the first half of the reveal, it was red through to white, and it was a little bit of like, okay, maybe not too sure how to feel about this. Some are cool. Like I love Genbu. I think he's super cool. I think Red Queen being the Panharmonicon I was asking for, super cool. I still don't think it makes the yellow sanctuaries any good, but like, hey, the fact that it serves as cool, Nocturne is sweet. So I guess we can kind of touch base on those first few, because I think afterwards for green and blue, it kind of like completely hit it out of the park in terms of like where we thought power level was going to be for the format. So like I personally said, kicked off, I really enjoyed Genbu myself. 8 cost 4 yellow reduction turtle that we'd been reading about in the lore text. On levels 1, 2, and 3 during your attack steps, at the start of steps, select one of your other Fable Beast Spirits. It cannot be blocked by your opponent's spirits with effects listed during this turn, which, like, surprise, surprise, that's like most spirits that are played in the game. And then during your attack step on levels 2 and 3, when one of your Fabled Beast Spirits is destroyed by your opponent, select one of your Fabled Beast Spirits and refresh it. So I think this is kind of just exactly what Fabled Beast needed, right? It always felt like Fabled Beast, you were playing it because they just happen to sometimes be unblockable, and they'll draw you cards every single time they're played, but it never really felt like the top end existed to bring it all together. And I do fact that they really doubled down on like, hey, unblockables, you'll get your blessed triggers, you'll get your blessed procs. Like Genbu feels, playability, where yellow's playability aside, I think it's been nice to kind of have like something to put a bow on Fabled Beast, which it felt like it was missing for a while.
Yeah. This really hits home. Yeah. The one thing that I have is my yellow Fabled Beast, right? So like this one's really interesting because again, we have now both sides of it where Hippocampo and Dual Eagle have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting, all things considered. And obviously they've been good because of Bless. Dual Eagle can make it unblockable, and then we're playing Paradise. Genbu now puts your opponent in a very awkward situation where you make the Dual Eagle unblockable, right? That's going to connect. And then you attack with your Hippocampo, who is already going to be selective in what they can block with. And then if they answer it, now the Dual Eagle is coming back and gaining you another plus trigger. So the fact that we actually care so much about both sides of this card really makes it feel like, hey, we don't have to play Phantom Beast King Lim anymore just to get the extra, cheat him down to level 1, and then your, Dual Eagles and Hippos can get there. So I think overall, very, very solid. Very happy that Fable Beast kind of got its key spirit that it's been wanting for so long, because now it also just gives us more flexibility. Yes, you're still going to be in the Fable Beast package, but spoiler, you want to be anyways because of your Paradise. And we did get a couple, vanillas and 2 costs to like round out the rest of the deck. So finally in a better spot overall from like, I'm happy to put these Fabled Beast in the deck sort of thing. And if we get any good 2-drop in set 4, I will just be absolutely ecstatic.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with about everything that you just said. I mean, I'm not high on this guy because I don't think this deck is ever going to be good, unfortunately. But this card is solid. I mean, he's reasonably costed. 4 reductions a lot. He's easy to maintain at 1, 2, and 4 cores. I don't love that this giant turtle carrying a castle on his back is a 5K at level 1 and a 6K at level 2. But I mean, it is what it is, right? But you can't have everything. I think that this is a good complement to God Beast and like this style deck. So now you have Unblockable coming from multiple angles between Genbu, God Beast, Dual Eagle. The handful of 2-drops that you already play with like Freestyle and maybe the Marty Bunny or whatever. So it's solid. Can it ever beat red? Probably not. Can it beat purple? Like maybe. I don't think this card really helps you beat purple.
We got Harpy Nest. I'll take it.
Yeah. So it's fine. It's solid card. It's not doesn't blow me away, but they could have done much worse.
Yeah. In general, I think yellow was like more interesting. I think in terms of yellow, it's like it still doesn't present itself as a strategy that's like a off face value tier 1, but they definitely fleshed out the archetypes in a way that kind of made it fun to talk about. Other landers got like a bajillion cards. So they all play into each other now. Yep. You got cards that like stack each other like we saw previously, but now we have Empress Guardian Red Queen, 6 cost, 3 yellow reductions. 1 summon select one of your opponent's spirits, reduce BP by decay, which kind of you don't care about, but it has during your main step when one of your other lander spirits is summoned, you may exhaust one of your Topaz Sanctuary Nexuses to activate one of the spirits when summoned effects the second time. So she's effectively a Panharmonicon for your other landers, depending on how many sanctuaries you got. Now, unfortunately, this deck needs to run sanctuaries. And, it's very restricted to the main phase, which means that like your Joker on swings won't be able to get double procs or anything like that. But I think the fleshing out of a lot of strategies is kind of what we're getting with some of the cards here, which I appreciate at the very least.
Yeah, the more that I look at this card, the more I think it's terrible. And maybe that's far off from what other people think. I think it's a cool card. Like I love it. Like thematically, the art's super cool. Like this card is like A+ for me from like a design standpoint. From a playability standpoint, like it's expensive for what it does. It's super small. Like 3, 4, and 6K is like that's like dog water stats for of course that's kind of yellow in a nutshell, but it has a win summon, so you just get crushed by Star Blessed Draw. Like I just I don't love this card from like the Spike side of me, but the other side that's maybe like a more Timmy casual player, like I'll play this card to local every week. I just don't think it'll ever see like the big stage.
So. Yeah, red is always going to pick on yellow. I mean, that's just such a non-starter for like when you play yellow, you just accept that's what's going to happen. And not only her having a when summon, like the entire other lander deck is when summon. You are playing 30 when summons the deck. It's just Star Bless is going to eat you alive. What is interesting though is based on like as long as you summon her at level 2, it is a 4K removal, assuming you have Topaz Sanctuary right to get the effect. So it's the whole like why does like Skull Lion or whatever the deadly balance on a body is. It's like, oh, we have these removals attached to a body that have to be overcosted or very low BP, and that just feels really bad. But again, from a Spike standpoint, it's all failed beast, and even that's like not there yet. But what I can really appreciate that we didn't really have in set 1 or even in set 2, we have really been missing a deck that plays well into itself, or like the new player can go, hey, I'm just going to jam all of these creature types into my deck, and this is my key spirit that I'm going to resolve. And all of the other lander cards play very well together. There's a very clear design effort to bring the entire deck together. And like the Pentan that lets you loop it back to the top, the Humpty Dumpty that's drawing you extra cards, like it's very flavorful. It's very fun. And I think the game just desperately needed more decks like that because, at locals, it's really meant to have fun. And obviously we don't want to have a whole set that falls flat, kind of like it did in parts of set 2, but it's nice to see something that is fun to look at, fun to play, and hopefully it can get players excited about like, oh, if I like this, but now I want to be a little more competitive, what else does yellow have if you want to stay into that like battle trick and BP reduction style of play? But, probably get some more other lander support in set 4 if I had to take a guess, and we might get another X-Rare for it. But yeah, I'm very excited to sleeve this up at locals and again, just have fun with it because it's so fun to just like get those high roll moments with Charles where suddenly like, oh, Charles comes into play, gets a Wen summon, exhaust by Topaz, get another Wen summon, and just get to start this entire like domino effect because you were able to sequence and set up a board that's going to reward you for it. Now, is that reward good enough compared to the rest of the field? Probably not, but hey, at least you had fun getting there. And I think that's something that I can definitely appreciate from an overall design standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing for me. Otherlanders feels like one of the most cohesive family types that we've gotten in a while. And it's very nice to it's like, don't get me wrong, I love the complexities of Battle Spirits and the fact that like, because of the way that the core system works, you can be very generic with your deck builds and throw a little bit of color into everything. But it's nice that like, you can build it's nice that there are decks out there that are easy to build, easy to throw together and just be like, this is what this deck does, and viability aside, it's just, it's these kinds of things that need to exist in the ecosystem of a card game to make it easier for new players to pick up and kind of want to keep running with it. So
yeah, one of my favorite things about this, and it's kind of ironic, is that like the Otherlander deck is like the ultimate like win summon deck, like you said, right? But like the best Otherlander is probably Alice, and like she just doesn't work in this deck, right? Because she doesn't have a win summon. So it's like, oh, I got Alice. Now I just have Alice.
Mm-hmm. I think she's like your final payoff, right? Because the idea is that like you free play all these bajillion spirits. You play Charles. You play Charles twice with Queen, which means you play two things. Odds are maybe you play another Charles off of that. Play. They're all 4, 5, and 6 drops, which means odds are once you have one of each on board, you're always getting at least a hit. And then the idea is that your payoff is that you swing and she next for like 10,000, right? Like I think that's the idea.
It's just kind of funny that like all these cards trigger more win summons and all this, and then like you just have Alice. That's like, okay, I'm going to stop the chain now. But it's still cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't forget there was another Alice in Japanese Battle Spirits as well, so that could be the set 4 next version of Alice.
Yeah. So to not dig too much time into kind of these other spirits, and I'll give like a quick rough 2 seconds of all of them, and then we can kind of talk about any specific ones you guys want to because odds are we're going to be talking about every single green and blue one in kind of finer detail because they're just that impactful. For purple, we have Viper Dragon, Swan Falong, which when destroyed by your opponent selects one of their refreshed spirits. You get to remove 3 cores from it and place them in the reserve. It has Curse, and then when your Serpent Spirit attacks, you may select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits, and your Serpent Spirit attacks it. You have Nocturna, which is a 7 cost, 3 purple reduction. And when it attacks as Curse, when destroyed, select 2 of your opponent's spirits, remove 1 core from each of these spirits and place them in the reserve. And then you get to ramp by 1 for each spirit that destroyed. And then when the spirit attacks, you may exhaust one of your Amethyst Sanctuary Nexuses to select a spirit card with Curse from your trash and summon it. Going on to red, we've got Blaze Lion Coalmane, 8 cost, 6 red reduction Emperor Beast. On levels 1, 2, and 3, when the spirit attacks, during your turn, the spirit gains 2 KBP for every spirit you control. And during your end step, at the start of the step, draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. Then we got the Ancient Guardian Trident Dragon, 7 cost, 3 red reduction Ancient Dragon. On level 1, 2, and 3, he's got Flash Awaken. On level 2 and 3, during your attack step, at the start of step, place 2 cores from your trash that aren't the soul core onto this spirit for every Ruby Sanctuary you control. And then when it attacks, you get to board wipe up to 6k total BP. And finally, moving on to white. A Sleepless Guardian of Frost Tiger, 7 cost, 3 white reductions. During your opponent's attack step, this spirit can block your opponent's spirits without a soul core on them, even if it's exhausted. So it's like forever suppression on everything except a soul core. When the spirit blocks, it gains 1k, so you get that Rocket City effect as well. And then on level 2, during your attack step, you get to choose spirits that have when the spirit blocks for each Diamond Sanctuary you have, and they can't be blocked by your opponent's spirits that cost 6 or fewer. And finally, Snowcapped Peak Goddess Scotty is a 9 cost, 4 white reduction Ice Princess. On level 1, 2, and 3, if you control a spirit with a soul core on it, your opponent can only select a spirit with a soul core on it when using effect to select one of your spirits, which kind of apparently will have some funny implications if you throw it on someone with armor, and then like you can kind of like block someone out of using their stuff, which is pretty jokes. On levels 2 and 3, she has armor white. And on level 3, during your opponent's end step, at the start of the step, return all your opponent's exhausted spirits to their hand. So all have cool utility at the very least. They all have text. But do any of them speak to you guys in terms of like things to maybe look out for?
Go ahead, Cos. I'll let you start.
Okay, so for me, I absolutely love Scotty. That's like the big one for me because coming from like a green-white, ramp and exhaust strategy, just the idea of having this big payoff that can suddenly bounce your opponent's entire board. Like they try to attack and then just say, okay, I'm sorry to do this to you. Here's a Thorn Prison, eat your entire board back to your hand. and it's probably going to win you on the spot. But the thing is, it's an ice princess, so it doesn't work with like the Fortress Nomengard City. Like there's no way to cheat the reduction for this. So it definitely feels like a big, heavy payoff that is flavorful in what it wants to be doing, and also just has a very solid effect. So I think there's something to be said about all the Guardians, because again, I really appreciate the whole like build into the payoff, give something fun to play at locals, but for something that's going to hopefully let a new archetype shine through, and again, just being like white-green control and what that might look like, I think Scotty has a really good chance of getting there for it. Or again, if we just have some like Gale units in there, if we want to be the unaggressive, or not the Gale, but needle shot. Sorry, I was thinking of a tap effect, right? But needle shot, thorn presence, things like that, to really heavily tax your opponent and punish them for attacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this one's very interesting. I don't know how good it is, but the effect's powerful, which is what you'd expect from a 9-cost card. Just currently, like I don't see any reason to play it over Enterprise. I don't see any reason. I just don't see any deck for it right now. I think that out of the red, purple, yellow, and white X rares, the ones that I'm most excited for are probably she's cool. I mean, I do like her. Colemaine's actually been better than I gave him credit for at first. I thought he's probably one of the worst X rares of the bunch, but there's actually some really cool decks you can build around them and just be able to empty your hands super fast and then draw back up to 3. He's pretty cheap to play, like despite being an 8 cost. I don't think anyone will get mad at me for spoiling this from the team, but we've been testing some weird decks with Ancient Fault, which counts as a 2 red reduction on the Nexus with a pretty cool level 2 ability with Colemaine, and it's actually been pretty sweet. So he's pretty cool. The Mini Nova is interesting as well. I think the Purple Serpent is probably pretty cool with like Rotting Swamp. So there's a lot of cool cards. I don't know if they're like tier 1, this card's awesome, you should always play it. But I think that these are wildly better than like set 2 stuff, right? Set 2, we can look at these cards and be like, okay, these cards are not playable. There's no deck for them. Like, why do they exist? Set 3 ones were like, okay, maybe they're not broken tier 1 cards, but there's uses for all of them. So, and that's exciting. That's what might sell the set. So, kind of have to see where it lands. Yeah, but those are cool. And then, leading into green, I've probably tested these more than you guys, so I'll just go ahead and start. Like, both these green X rares have been exceptional. The plant is incredibly good, mostly because of the green Sanctuary is probably one of the best ones. But the 6 cost Gale guy has just been crazy. Jaeger, yeah, he's been nuts. The Gale deck with Highlands has just been unbelievably good. And it's not really a Gale deck. I think the only Gale cards that we were playing were like Jaeger, like
Tokiwa.
Tokiwa, like 1 or 2 of the 5-drop with the mouth on her back, whatever. And then one
Fang.
other, the 10-drop. There's like 3 10-drops. I see people only playing like 1 of the 10-drop because they're like, oh man, it costs 10. Like, and if you're playing Highlands, you need like 2 or 3 of that card because that is your win condition. Like it's usually like, play your stuff early, work your Ant-Man, Emerant, whatever, Highlands, obviously. And then like 5-drop Tokiwa into the 10-drop or the 6-drop into the 10-drop. And there's like no way you're ever losing the game. So he's been really impressive.
Yeah, and I think so I'll actually read out the card and then kind of go into a little bit of details. Black Huntsman Shatten Jaeger as a 6 cost 3 green reduction Blade Beast on levels 1, 2, and 3 when the spirit attacks. Gale 2 on level 2 and 3 during your attack step when one of your spirits with Gale other than Black Huntsman Jaeger reduces your opponent's life, refreshes the spirit, and on level 3 refresh the spirit when your opponent uses one of their effects to draw a card. So being a 6-drop lines up incredibly well against Flood. And you know how you were talking about earlier, kind of like White's issue with dealing like bigger bodies and like why the Gale deck is reading incredibly well. Part of that is because your Gale deck actually lines up really well against what Blue's trying to do. You can apply pressure. If you got Fang, you're able to deal like big double damage or whatever the heck. So it's just like the deck lines up really well with kind of where we're assuming the meta is going to pivot over to. And like the fact that, you know, with your high lands, this is ramping you 2 or 4, depending if you have like a pair of them off rip, because you only need the 1 core to have the Gale to be able to go off of it. So I think this Spirit lines up incredibly well with applying pressure, you know, and also with the fact that the Gale deck is kind of lining up to be a deck where you can actually have like dual or triple attacks on some of your spirits with the way that you can sequence your attacks, which makes it very tough for your opponent to deal with, especially with the fact that everything has Gale.
Yeah, that's a point that I was going to come back and make after, you know, you were done talking there, is you have so many ways to double attack your opponent now. Like I was even playing the 7-drop Tokiwa, right? So you have the 6-drop, you have the 5-drop. I forget her name, but you know, I'm sure you guys know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, Miss Backhussy or whatever.
Yeah, and then the 6-drop, and then 7-drop Tokiwa, and then the 10-drop. So like half of your deck is just double attackers, and that's super annoying for your opponent because then they have to have like an ice shield every turn, or else they're just going to get, you know, attacked 4 times by 2 of your spirits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this card incredibly good. And then to kind of round out Forest Guardian Alrone, 5 cost, 2 green reduction, Leaf Kindred. On levels 1, 2, and 3, 1, 7, place 1 core from the Void, each onto one of your Emerald Sanctuary Nexuses and the Spirit. And then on level 2 and 3, when the Spirit attacker or blocks, select 2 of your opponent's spirits that cost 3 or fewer, or 1 that costs 6 or fewer, and exhaust them. So honestly, great defensive abilities. Is always ramps at least 1, but because you're playing Sanctuaries anymore, instead probably still doing 2 or 3. The fact that she's a mini Thorn Prison on a body, like just great flexibility on that front. Yeah,
the way that she was working for me is that she was like the bridge from your early game into Jaeger and your 10-drop if you didn't draw Highlands, right? So, you know, it's really easy to just go like Worker Ant-Man into her, or, you know, Sanctuary Ant-Man her, and then you're ramping into your, you know, late game. So she's been really good. I mean, you know, I don't think it's one you ever want to play like 4 of.
No, God no.
But, you know, it's a good complement to Highlands. It's like Highlands copies 4 and 5, or 5 and 6 if you're, you know, playing that deck.
Yeah. So, Cause, any thoughts on the green before we move on to your favorite color?
No, the only thing I'll add is I love how the key spirits you want to play out of Gale just auto level themselves off Highland, which is really great. And then the other thing I couldn't expect is, you know, we were talking about green really wanting to have another good key spirit that's going to ramp some extra cores, and then somehow we got Hurricane, and then immediately followed we got the Plant Mommy back to back. It's like, all right, cool. I guess this is going to be our, you know, our ramp bridges to get into that 10-drop more reliably. And whoo, Gale has been good already. Again, just testing Toki 5. I'm really excited to see where both of these end up, because Huntsman just seems like it's going to be one annoying card. And again, the fact that it's 6, so you can't flood it, is going to be painful for a lot of people.
This card is, and like if they bomb it, like thanks, I'm just going to ramp 2 cores again. Like it's just, it's so gross. Yeah.
So I have to add, just because I'm sure someone in the comments might even call it out, is that this made us forget about Archduke very, very quickly.
Yep. I was going to make a comment because it's like Plant Mommy just took that role like instantly. Because again, the Emerald Sanctuaries are great. It plays into your strategy. She's going to be ramping you 2 minimum most of the time. Like crazy, absolutely crazy card.
So, green, awesome. Glad to see that was roundabout. It makes me so incredibly excited. This deck is, I'm not gonna lie, this is a huge contender for me going into kind of the Netherlands, at least before going into deep testing. It's something that I'm super excited about. But then blue just came out swinging, just kind of throwing hands. So we'll actually start with kind of probably, unfortunately, the most unplayable one, and kind of build our way up from there. So first, Coliseum Golem, which I love this card. I think this card's so cool. 10 cost, 6 blue reduction Golem. On levels 1, 2, and 3, when the spirit attacks, you may exhaust one of your Nexus to summon one of your Golem tokens, which again, Golem tokens are 0 cost level 1 10Ks that are blue. And then on level 2 and 3, during either attack step, when one of your Nexuses is exhausted, select one of your Nexuses, place a core from the Void onto it, so you get to ramp. And then on level 3, during your end step, at the start of the end step, you may exhaust one of your nexuses to refresh all of your golems here. So you get to attack with them and have them defensively, and the stats are huge. It's a 7k on 1, 11k on 4, 13k on 6. Cause.
I love it so much. That's all I like. I love the artwork, man. I love the thematics. I love the golems that you create just being 10Ks. They look good. I want this archetype to be a real thing so bad. So bad. Because we have like the 5-drop that also gets you more golem tokens. And it's like, cool, you have these giant walls. But spoiler, everyone's going to be playing like a 2 of flood minimum, and you're just asking to get the biggest blowout of your life while trying to play this card. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's really cool if flood and if shark did not exist, because you can then build up a board where it's like, hey, these 10Ks matter. We have a way to refresh, and there's other cards in the set that matter about exhausting your nexus to get even more value. Like, there is such a cool deck that you can build with this guy. And I just don't know a world where it's ever going to be playable compared to the other 3 X rares that we got. But my God, I freaking love the artwork so much.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. The art is bang on. The effects are very thematic, very cool. My biggest problem with this card is that, at least early on in my experience, and I've probably played like 12 hours worth of blue testing so far, like, the best blue decks that I've played aren't necessarily heavy blue, right? Like, you just play the best blue cards, and then the rest of your deck is like, the best cards from the other colors. So because of that, it's really hard to get the reductions to do this guy justice, right? Like, I understand that you have like 8 to 10 blue nexuses that are very good and you probably want to play, but if all you're doing is playing nexuses, like, you're going to get pounded early on by, the decks that are more proactive. Like, it's just, I love this card. Even in a flood meta, I think he's still good because he's very hard to remove from play. It's just coming up with a deck that has the proper reductions to really use him properly. You have to have a blue deck that wants to attack. You have to have a blue deck that has a lot of reductions. And, like, to me right now, early on, that deck doesn't exist yet. But maybe in a set or two, we'll have something that this guy can slot into, because it is a good card. It's just, I don't think the time is right for him. This probably wasn't the best X-rare for this set.
It definitely feels like the set 2 issue with green, right? Yeah. Where it's like, we just need a deeper card pool, and then he might get to do something.
Yeah,
right?
We just need more nexuses that, like, probably exhaust them by themselves, right? Like, that have abilities that say, hey, exhaust me to do a thing, right? And like, to that end, it'll lend itself both to its reduction and to the fact of the payoff for the golems. And the golems are like, if the golems become things that you can do for free, because let's say the nexus will exhaust itself anyways, then it becomes like a self-serving engine where you're not losing hand advantage to be able to do it or whatever. It's like a 1-card army that, like, your opponent eventually kind of has to deal with. And, like, sure, they can flood it, but they'll run out of floods or whatever. So it's just one of those things where it probably, like Kaz was saying, opens up with as we get a deeper card pool. So
yeah.
Moving on from that, we've got Mermaid Princess Lyrica, 5 cost, 3 blue reduction, a Sife, level 1 and 2. When summoned, you may play a Nexus card from your hand without paying its cost. And you guys didn't want Depths Ban. Come on now. And then on level and by you guys, I mean the community. And then on level 2, during either attack step, at the start of the step, you may select up to 2 of your nexuses and exhaust them during this turn. As long as you control this spirit, treat the selected nexus as their highest level. This does things like turn on Impaler. This does things like turn on Unchained Arena, so that you're double taxing your opponent. This card is incredible.
Yeah, this has been my favorite card by 10 miles and testing, like this whole set. It is it's so fun to play with when you're putting into play like ridiculous nexuses. Like, this card by itself makes Victory Oath playable. Like, it's so good to be able to cheat 4 or 5 resources for no reason, and then also get their level 2 effects. Like, it's very, very powerful. It's very dangerous for future Nexus. It's just, it does everything you could ever want.
That was going to be my hot take, is I absolutely hate this card. because it is going to be so dangerous for what, like, look, I know better than most. Blue is the Nexus color. It is totally meant to be like, hey, let's do dirty things with Nexus. The fact that it's just any of them and you get to play it for free, like, same thing with Michaela, right? We're running into the same issue where it's like now they have to be extremely mindful of every Nexus they print going forward and what level 2 that they give Nexus. That said, cards cracked, absolutely excited for it. But I have to add the disclaimer of like, this could be a very bad thing in 1 or 2 sets.
Yeah, future design, like these are like future design case, like breaking cards, right? And it's just like, imagine you could play depths with it, right? Like, like come on.
Yeah, there's like the early decks I built with this card, you know, Anton built quite a few decks too, is like 14 Nexuses and like half of them aren't even blue. It's just like, you know, let's play, you know, Impaler Forest because we can. Let's play Rotting Swamp because we can. Let's play, you know, Victory Oath, Canyon. Like you just play all these cards because like you tell yourself, man, I never want to pay 4 cores or 5 cores for this Nexus. But when it's for free, Victory Oath is like, okay, I'm going to play her, play a free Starblast draw, go on with my turn, use her ability to make my Enchained Arenas both level 2. Like, you just do really nutty things with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she's incredibly powerful. I think scary for design, and opens up a lot of different strategies. I think she kind of opens up this like slow control blue really well because of the fact that she can turn on the level 2. So it's the fact that you can have those Nexuses be at those lower levels, but not use up the cores, which means you can use those for your defensive pieces on your opponent's turn and still always have the tax and still always have those abilities. And then it like in a world where we have Nexuses that are good proactively on level 2, which currently none really exist, but like you could then have that. So she's like, the fact that she's flexible on either attack step, the fact that like she cheats on costs, the fact that like
3 reduction. She has 3 reduction. Like that's crazy. I don't care that she's a 3K at level 1. 3 reduction. She did her job.
Yeah. No, she's so good. And just I'll leave you for last for egregious reasons. We've got Truth God Mandela, the feature card of the set, 8 cost for blue reduction War God. When summoned on levels 1 and 2, if you spend a soul core as a part of this spirit's summoning cost, discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck for each Nexus, not specifically blue, that you control. You can discard a maximum of 12 cards with this effect, and then on level 2, when the spirit attacks, you may discard a Spirit with Crush to discard the top 6 cards of your opponent's deck. I don't think that level 2 matters.
It does not.
A lot of time it doesn't, but the one thing I will say I'm upset about this card is that it should have been only blue Nexus in the same way that the Shark was blue Nexus, because I think it just opens up, because I'm going to get burned alive first talking about how great Mill is because it's interactive and because we saw all the Crush stuff, which is very much what Mill is meant to do in Battle Spirits. And now it's like, well, all right, well, now we just have this guy at the top end that's just going to YOLO off 12 cards, and you can play a rainbow, you know, Nexus if you want to. So blue is meant to be a very greedy color. And this one, like, I would not be surprised at all if it catches an errata just to be blue focused. That would be my one, hopefully not a hot take, but maybe people will come around into seeing why. It definitely should be just blue Nexus.
I give it 2 weeks before the Facebook group is flooded with this card needs banned, because what it does is it encourages and creates very non-interactive play styles, which I love. Like that's like my bread and butter. Like I want my opponent to have no fun at all, and I'm the one who's going to be having all the fun. And this guy is just insane. Like you want to Starblast draw him, perfect.
Go for it. Draw 4 cards.
And it's just you know, he is just crazy. The fact that he and the Mermaid aren't color locked are just insane. Some of the first decks that Anton and I built for blue were like, you know, like I was saying, like 14 Nexus, 20 spells, maybe more, like 12 creatures. And all you do is sit there, never attack, kill their cards every turn, and then mill them out. Like, and it was insane. So this guy is probably going to be a problem. but we'll see how it works. Just the fact that Impaler Forest exists makes it even worse, because it's just like, play him, kill him off, like just core death him, set an ice shield your opponent, get back, from Impaler, do it again. Like, it's just, it's brutal.
Yeah, it's incredibly painful. It's not super interactable. And the ways that you can interact with it suck, right? Like, okay, so what bursts we have? Well, we can Star Blast draw, so draw 4. So we actually just milled, 16. We can counter sword, so I put it on the top of your deck so that you can do it again next turn. It's just it tops ends incredibly well. And I will say, I think in a vacuum, it's not as egregious, but when you combo with the fact that Mermaid exists the way she does, when you combo with the fact that like Shark, who we're about to see, exists, this can lend itself to a deck that is incredibly unfun for a lot of players. I am going to have the best time of my life, but I know that like this is going to lend itself to a lot of frustrated players, because a lot of players are going to lose to this card.
Yeah.
And I apologize in advance for the first European Geo.
Oh my God. and yeah, they're not going to have a good time. And I don't think the answers to mill that they printed, like the yellow one where you get to put it back to your hand, the white one that prevents mill, but it's on flash timing, so it actually hits like not the first crush, but the second crush. Like, it's none of that matters. There are no good answers to this card.
Yeah, no, it's happening. You can't stop it. You just have to, either sideboard into 60 cards and hopefully you can kill them, before you die.
Yeah. So
I guess my hot take I'm going to get on record real quick is I am going to expect Mandala and Mermaid to get rotted in before set 3 ends to be blue locked. That would be my guess.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I think blue is a significantly blue. Yeah. Like, I think the strategies revolving blue are going to be significantly worse because of it, because we don't have the depth of blue nexuses that we need to really kind of like, want to flesh out those strategies with 12, 16, whatever nexuses like they kind of want us to. But I think for the health of the game, if the health of the game is not letting these kinds of strategies be like over and under incredibly powerful, probably something that's going to need to happen.
I don't think they'll do anything.
I could see them not do something also, right? Because set 4, we're jumping into double gems, which means we're more likely to have ways to be able to, destroy the opponent before they lend themselves to getting so deep. It's who knows, right? Like, set 4 sounds like it's going to be a power bump, so maybe we won't need it, especially if the game speeds up. But to jump it, the last card, the card that I have had the most discussions with almost everybody in every community, whether it's IRL or whatever, we got Cthulhu Shark, a 6-cost, 1 blue reduction aberration. On levels, or as an additional summoning cost, you must destroy one of your blue nexuses. There's like a sense, so no matter what, you can't cheat this and play without having to get rid of a blue nexus. But on summon, on level 1, 2, and 3, destroy all spirits without a soul core on them. And on level 3, while the spirit attacks, when the spirit destroys one of your opponent's spirits via comparing BP, select the nexus card in your trash and place it without paying its cost. This card is absolutely absurd.
That's correct. There's like no drawback, right? Like, the drawback is you have to kill a nexus and I guess draft your own board. Yeah, like that's never going to happen. So it's crazy. And half the time when you kill your own nexus, you're ramping 1, right? Because of like Enchained Arena. So I don't know what else to say about this card. It is you don't even have to keep it, right? Like, you can rat itself, keep something else, and then just Impaler Forest it back. Again, plays into those non-interactive strategies. Sure, your opponent can keep their best card, maybe, but it's incredible. Like, there's nothing else I can really say about it. It goes on every blue deck, regardless of what you're doing, and it'll get splashed into, a lot of quite a few other decks as well, with some package with like Enchained Arena, Lighthouse, and Shark. So see where it lands up, but it's broken.
Yeah, blue purple is definitely a home for it. But I do got something I got to say about this card that I'm really upset about. It's not going to have an SPR. Why?
I was thinking that earlier.
It is not going to have an SPR.
It's like, why? Where's my Cthulhu Shark SPR? need it in my life. But
yeah,
we're not going to get it.
no, I mean, it's got like, it's funny because it's got like, it's like you can set up a Nomen Guard, which quote unquote punishes your opponent blowing up your board, and you can, soul core up something that you want to save, but then you can use the, I forget what Nexus it is that allows you to attack with something that has a soul core on it, so you can kind of crash to that for like a full board wipe or something of the sort. So I think, as much as I think that like Mandela will lend itself to being kind of the most frustrating because a lot of opponents are going to lose to it, I think Shark is probably the number one cards that people are going to bang their heads onto the wall because they just lost their entire board, right? And like the decks that are looking to do this, the biggest offenders are going to have the ability to line this up to do it turn after turn after turn. And I think that's going to be incredibly frustrating because board wipes are the types of cards that like you kind of just need to learn how to deal with, because like you can't, it's a feels bad in the same way that like losing out to like an Exhaust Nexus blowout feels bad, and like, oh, I'm never going to let that happen again. Which, like, unfortunately, when it comes to cards like Shark, it's just like, okay, well, now I can't overcommit to my board because, like, I can get curse comboed, but, like, it doesn't cost my opponent 13 cores to do. It cost him, 5 cores to do. So, the card's incredibly pushed and honestly probably going to be annoyingly expensive. I was so ready for this first Grand Open after the Pro Tour to be like, oh, yeah, I'll spend $10, get whatever I need, and then move on. And now between, like, these, like, 6 different XRs that I want to pick up between blue and green, I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna actually have to spend money.
Yeah, thankfully we got a lot of cases going, but thinking back to the first, like red, purple, yellow, and white all just feel fine, right? They've had the most time, they've had a lot of sets, there's a lot of support from them, the card pool is very deep. Green finally feels like it's coming on board, we have some really good things to look forward to, and then blue is just like, fuck it, we ball, right? Like it's out here and ready to go, which is really exciting from a set design, because I think a lot of people did feel a little bit let down, and myself at least included, as someone who's played a lot of green almost all of set 2. And blue really does feel like, yes, it's still going to be a splash, but it has very strong pieces that's going to make it stand out in the meta. And as we mentioned with Shark, there's going to be a lot of things that players just have to respect for it. So I'm very excited to see where this goes. And I was going to be playing blue no matter what in season 3 or wave 3, whatever you want to call it. But now I'm like super excited to play because there's quite a few different decks I at least want to try out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to give like one more shout out to the art. Honestly, the art this set has been absolutely phenomenal. I love the art on almost all these XRs, the SPRs, which we won't have on screen, but you guys can go check them out in the community Discord. Also look super sick. Love the SPR art. In terms of what they've done from the looks of it, we're getting SPR for a key magic from 4 different colors. So we've got Double Heart, Soul Crush, Dimension Rift, and Strong Draw. And it looks like we're getting SPRs for all of the Guardians. So we've got Trident, we've got Nocturna, we've got the Red Queen, which means the last 2 coming through are probably going to be Alrone and Frost Tiger, I guess. So very excited about that. Love the art. If we can get a full set of this level of art, I think that's going to be very, very big things for this game moving forward.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
But that does open up the entirety of the set. Again, the set's available on BSSDB, so if you guys want to go ahead and jump on there to deck build. But I mean, gentlemen, now that we have the full set, I know we've kind of run a little bit long here, but thoughts on set 3. We've done a little bit of testing. I know we have about some odd couple of dozen hours between all of us kind of looking, deck building, testing, and whatnot. How do we feel about the release or the cards available in the set?
I think it's a positive. I mean, I'm a fan. Like I think it's much better than set 2. I think it's probably not as good as set 1 because set 1 was so cranked up to 10. But this set feels like it has more than half a dozen playable cards. So, it's been exciting to test and build some decks, and we'll just have to see where they land as far as like a Grand Open level goes. So, I mean, I'm excited.
Yeah, I think no matter what, blue's going to have some amount of impact. But then what I also really appreciate is there's just fun decks for people to build and play at locals. Like, again, going back to Otherlander, that is going to be a super fun deck just to jam and have some fun with. So I can at least appreciate that from very early on. It looks like we're having both let's have fun at locals. Let's have these like big key spirit payoffs and just, get to do those strategies that you want to execute on. and then also like, oh my God, blue and green are looking insane. I'm really excited. And we'll hopefully see a more diverse cut. We're like, hey, we have all 6 colors now. Can we get all 6 colors in top 8? Probably not, but fingers crossed. It'd be really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think my biggest thing has been kind of like the failures of set 2 kind of aren't repeating themselves in set 3, where set 3 feels like there are new ways to play the game, right? That a lot of, even in red, it's like big red, kind of like between the Sanctuary and the Dragon. You know, are they amazing? I don't know, but like they are definitely a way to play the game. I built another Landers deck and it looks like stupid fun, right? I can play Nightling Aristocrats and kind of use mini Nemesis and big Nemesis to kind of draw infinite cards and do things. Fabled Beast now has a Key Spirit. Well, Machine Beast's already good, so we can ignore Frost Tiger, but like, you know, so it's, and the fact that green feels like I can play a green deck that's not just cards go burr, right? And like have some success with it. The fact that blue feels like it can finally introduce a degenerate play style that I love, because yes, I know most people hate the kind of players like I do, but I need to be, there need to be times when my play style is represented in a game as well, and I'm very excited for it. So in terms of set 3, I think the last round of XRs plus kind of digging deeper into some of the cards that open up strategies have been a very welcoming breath of fresh air in terms of deck builds. And like I've been like every day I choose a different color. I'm like, okay, what are we building in this color now, right? Just to see if I can get new ideas grabbed. And I think it's going to be, especially since we're jumping right from the Pro Tour to the Grand Open, and it's going to be Grand Open, Grand Open, Grand Open. So there's no like flex breathing room. It's going to be tournament results, and then like next week, okay, what breaks the meta to kind of do this tournament, and then the week after, right? So it's going to be very fun to see that quick burst evolution of the meta, you know, backed by tournament results, which will then have like a 3-4 week break, and then as we go into Pro Tour 3 and Worlds. So I think it's going to lend itself to a very explosive first few weeks, which I am very excited for, and hopefully, you know, will lend itself to quite a big shakeup. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, with that said, that was our review of set 3. We have to send off set 2. We're going to be jumping onto the Pro Tour next, and that's what you guys have to look forward to. We no more Grand Opens, so we have 3 weeks ish of kind of downtime before everyone moves on to start traveling to the Netherlands for the Pro Tour, which will cap off set 2 before the release of set 3. Of course, you guys should talk to your local game stores to talk about the reveal events. Not only should you guys be putting the Pro Tour on the TV of your shop so you guys can watch all the action go, because presumably it's going to be live stream, but you guys will definitely want to participate in your reveal events. Your reveal events are the greatest opportunity you have to engage new players into your local game stores, guys. So I highly recommend you guys participate, show up, and try to push towards getting a great attendance, because, you know, new players, when they show up to a shop and they see like, oh my God, there's 12 other people here learning the game, picking up the game, it provides a great opportunity to kind of bring life back to this local. So it's an incredibly important event. I highly recommend you guys check those out. The lore set releases this weekend in North America. Pick them up. You know, I know a lot of those cards kind of work in conjunction with each other, but there are a few cards, Godslayer, Tokiwa, cards like those that will lend themselves great to your collection moving forward. And I gotta say, with the gold bordering, they look absolutely gorgeous. But with that said, guys, that was this week's service. Thank you guys so much for coming to the Church of Pentan podcast. And until next week, may the cores be our saviors.
Thanks, guys.